Hi guys, my name is Travis Bayless. I'm with Joe Briseno. Is that correct? Anyways, this is the mental health portion called Let's Talk About It. Okay, so let me just dive into it. We both, as I'm aware, we both have bipolar disorder. Are you one or two? Are you aware of if it's more pervasive or less pervasive, or
I think it's two.
you think it's two? Okay, so that typically means it's less pervasive. So my question to you is that typically people with bipolar disorder usually get diagnosed in their 20s. You happen to be in your late 30s or mid 30s, is that correct? Mid 40s. So that's pretty late. Do you feel from the beginning that you felt it wasn't a real illness, that you could never believe it, or did you pretty much downright believe that it was something that you knew you had and you had to get treated for?
My symptoms didn't appear until later in life, and maybe it was always there, but my diagnosis didn't come until 5-6 years ago. First time possibility was raised that I was bipolar, but prior to that, a good long time though of depression and maybe some generalized anxiety disorder with that, which is another diagnosis I have.
How were you officially diagnosed? Were you in the hospital? Did they give you a diagnosis in 2008, or was it some other route, like you had a suicidal ideation and you had just ended up?
I think the first time I heard it was I was doing counseling and medication management through it used to be called, it's Canvas Health now. It's Washington County. It's Washington County's version of mental health support, and I was living in Washington County in Woodbury at the time. So I think that's the first time I heard of it. Then I was getting services from People Incorporated through an ACT team. And I had to have a diagnostic assessment with them. And
were you ever officially placed on a caddy waiver, or are you familiar with that? Or
I only know a little bit about that, and I'm waiting for Social Security disability decision. And I was recently in an IRTS facility, and they said if that comes down, if Social Security deems you disabled, then you get caddy waiver, I guess, is with that, and that helps with finding housing. I'm not, so I don't know a lot about it. I don't know.
Okay, that's fine. We won't have to dive too much into it, but I guess I'm a little bit curious to the fact that, do you believe when you were in prison or in jail, do you feel that affected your mental health and made you in a worse state, or was that actually the care and that was pretty good and you're taken care of really well?
No. Due to the nature, the resources, the lack of funding, let me say this, in general, Western culture and Western society, this country does a very poor job providing for its mentally ill. In this country, we have a history, as recently as last century, just rounding up our mentally ill and throwing them in jail. We don't take care of their symptoms. We don't give them medication. We don't give them counseling. We just round them up, throw them in an asylum or in jail. And this country has a horrible history of dealing with its mentally ill. So let me just say that. I did get some, they were small little meetings inside prison with what you call your therapist. I don't know if I call it therapy. Maybe once every 3 or 4 weeks, you go see them and talk to them for 5-10 minutes. But that was there, and the spectrum of availability for mental health meds for whatever your diagnosis is. I mean, if it's severe as psychosis, if it's schizophrenia, or if it's just something like bipolar generalized anxiety, they don't take care of you very well in prison. They'll give you the spectrum availability of medications is very abbreviated. There's a lot of things they won't let you have in prison. So I chuckle when you said that you thought maybe they do okay there. No, they just due to the nature of the funding in this state, and I'm sure this is a fairly progressive and liberal state compared to the other 49 states. And having said that, if I was in prison in, say, Texas or Louisiana or something, I'm sure it'd be much worse. But
So you pretty much believe that there's a lot of issues when it comes to getting and receiving help when you're in prison if you have a mental illness. So my question to you is, if funding isn't available, what is the next step that could be done to help people instead of just rounding them up in jail thinking that they're mentally ill and that's where they belong? Is there something you think that would work better? Because I'm just
on
curious.
a legislative level, I mean,
Since you're into politics,
on a legislative level, there's got to be more resources put into funding and the help provided. And again, we're a more progressive state. We're in a fairly progressive county, Hennepin County here, and there are there's help there if you want it. But I don't know if the people out there that really need the help, a lot of those people don't know where to go. There's not enough money thrown at marketing this or advertising this. I'm not saying run TV commercials, but visibility is, and I don't know, leaves a lot to be desired.
so another question in regards to dual diagnosis, you were struggling with a gambling addiction. Do you feel, since you're diagnosed with bipolar, that this actually contributed to the fact that you had a gambling addiction, or was it just kind of an add-on or a subsidiary to your problems, or was it the only problem? Or
No, the gambling. I mean, that had a lot to do with the depression. Yeah, had a lot to do. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but bipolar is also another name for manic depressive, right? Yeah. So I mean, I was manically depressed many times back in college when I was losing all my money. And sometimes I'd win. I mean, I didn't always lose. But
so is it kind of like you're in a state of like disbelief and depression that you feel like it's time to spend, then you hope that the high will come if you get a big reward from it? Is that true?
Yeah, that's something.
How often was that luck able to help you out throughout the?
That's the problem with problem gambling, with addictive gambling. People have systems, people like to think they're disciplined, and I always thought I was a disciplined and gambler. And there were times where I'd set my limit and I'd win it or I'd lose it and I'd walk out. But a lot of people call themselves systems gamblers. They have a system, whether you're playing slot machines or you're playing blackjack or poker. It's hard to stay disciplined and hard to stay with that system when things start going bad, and then you kind of throw your system out the window and you just start, throwing more money at your problem. So, yeah, you may walk into a casino with the best intentions and have a plan, but yeah, the plans don't always, you don't always stick to your plan. So, yeah, I think there's a lot of relationship with the mania and the gambling.
So another question regarding that: have you had a few, or maybe just one hospitalization when it comes to your illness? Or
I've walked myself to the emergency room 3 or 4 times in my life when I felt like harming myself and felt suicidal.
were there issues regarding maybe your relationship? Because you mentioned that you had 2 relationships that pretty much maybe was the onset for the bipolar, or do you feel that a lot of it is actually environmental versus maybe a genetic component when it comes to the illness, or do you think it's maybe defined by each other?
We're a product of our environment. There's a lot of to be said about nature versus nurture. I'm not sure. I mean, I've lived it, and I'm not sure if necessarily if Koreans or Southeast Asians are more prone to depression, or I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that. I'd be interested to see if there's stronger links with.
So regarding the deep-seated issues, you just handled like not only your daughter's death, but someone in the family, your mother's aunt or
My mother's sister.
mother's sister.
So on my mother's side would be my maternal aunt, my only maternal aunt. So this is my mother's only sibling, and so I wasn't terribly close to her. Her name is Dawn Hemmingson, but I mean, it's a loss for the family. But my problem is when I see it upset my mother, and so when I see my mother upset, I get upset. So that's why I've taken that hard, because my mother's only sibling, and she's not taking it well. So when I see my mother upset, I get upset.
So since the deaths were so close to each other and it was so recent, do you feel that you're in a situation where life is pretty much unbearable, or are you actually dealing with it better? Do you feel getting out and talking to people or support system is helping? Are you managing your meds, or did anything happen or change since those two deaths?
I'm going to preface my comments by saying this. There's a lot of people out there who have dealt with a lot more tragedy in their lives and dealt with it and persevered. I'm not as necessarily as strong as them, and I've thought about ending my life for less than what I'm dealing with now. I was suicidal after losing $500 at the casino back in my college years. So I mean, I've been willing to end my life for less than that. But now, given this enormous tragedy that I've been dealing with, the loss of my only child, it's been rough. And my first reaction, my first fallback was to, find a really cheap and painless method and exit this world. But I have a 9-year-old niece that reminds me a lot of my daughter, and I really don't want to do that to her, and I certainly don't want to do that to my mother while my mother's still alive. And I've been telling my therapist this for years. I said, well, the only thing that prevent me from doing anything, really, I mean, I really would like to, but my mother. But once my mother passes away, I feel like I have a green light. I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore, but I've been saying that for a long time.
When it comes to suicide, I've always been afraid of doing the deed, because I feel like the repercussion if you survive it is going to be worse than it was before. Do you feel that's pretty much how you feel about suicide? And
yes,
even though you're invested in a lot to research, you feel that what prevents you because you're scared of living?
I'm scared of, yeah, that's funny you bring up, because I have thought of that. I always thought if I jumped from a really great height, I wouldn't be able to finish the job, because I'd probably just end up a quadriplegic or a paraplegic, or if I shot myself in the head, it would miss the vital parts of the brain or something, and I'd end up, surviving with permanent disabilities, or what are some other ones? If I overdosed on some sort of medication or poison or something, I would just end up needing a liver transplant. So those things do stay in the back of my mind. And that's one of the reasons I think that it's a check and balance right now of why I'm still here. But having said that, this last Christmas Eve, I was in North Memorial for a couple of nights. And this last Christmas Eve, I took half a bottle of sleeping pills. And that was before my daughter passed away. So again, I've thought about doing that, suicide, for far less than what I'm dealing with now.
So my question to you, do you feel this is a turning point or a new mission for yourself or a new goal for yourself, that if your daughter were still alive today, is there something you want to accomplish, or do you feel it's still the end of the road and that you're not sure what you want to do? Maybe it's more mental medication help or therapy, or maybe psychiatric work, or maybe a mission to volunteer or a job, or any of these in the back of your mind when it comes to fulfilling that sense of loss that you experience?
I still think it's still too soon, and the wounds are too fresh for me to make any grandiose plans, to lay out any great structured plan, or I don't know. Before my daughter passed, I thought about her of every second, of every minute, of every day. And that hasn't changed. And she's gone. And it's going to be rough. So I can't make any promises to stick to a plan, to have, meet these goals and check these boxes on a list. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm going to try and hold it together right now for my daughter and for my mother. That's all I got to say.
That's good. So this relates just generally to bipolar disorder. Have you accepted it? Are you embarrassed of it? Do you feel like it's just who you are, or it's like what you have? I wouldn't say it's who you are. Do you feel like you've grown to manage it, accept it? Or
I've never been embarrassed about my depression, or I joke about it all the time, and I'll tell anyone who's willing to listen. Yeah, I'm bipolar. I'm depressed.
So Kyle just wants to ask is if you mentioned that you're pretty intelligent and you grew up in a very pretty high IQ, I guess. Do you feel that with that innate ability that might have affected your mental health later in the years to come?
It's definitely affected it, because knowing what I know, the things that I know, and what I'm capable of, it makes it more frustrating to be living, in a boarding home, in a GRH boarding house, unemployed. I'm no car, no job, no house. It's embarrassing that in that sense, for someone my age, and for what I've been through in life, and for what the gifts I was given, the talent I was given. That's what makes it frustrating. My daughter just passed away, but yet I don't have the financial resources to aid with her memorial service, with her funeral. That's humiliating and embarrassing. I mean, I'm in my 40s. I should have a nest egg put away. I should have money put away, squirreled away, and I don't. I should have the resources. I should have a 401k. I don't. I don't have. I blew that a long time ago. I had a deferred comp account. I blew that a long time ago. So it seems like the consequences for all my mistakes later in life here have all come back and haunted me at the same time. So it's very frustrating. And again, that exacerbates, that perpetuates my depression and my suicidal thoughts.
So there's a lot of people in general that in the community believe that if you put yourself to work, things will get better or things like that. But do you feel like on another perspective that if you feel like crap or not feeling very good, that it's really hard to get yourself motivated to work on a daily basis?
Working in the legislature, I've worked 60-hour weeks. Working as the store manager of a Perkins and a Culver's and a McDonald's, I've worked 50, 60-hour weeks. Could I right now, with my mindset, work a 40-hour week, 50-hour week right now? Probably not. Could I work 15, 20 hours a week? Maybe. Another thing that should be pointed out in our society, there's not a lot of forgiveness when it comes to forgiveness of your sins criminally, forgiveness of debt. I can provide two good examples of that. I am not eligible to get the federal economic stimulus money, the $1,200 from the federal government, because I owe arrears on child support and what's called revenue recapture by the state of Minnesota. Any tax refund I'll ever get, anything like that, tax rebate, a stimulus payment, that's snapped up from past debt, namely arrears and child support. And now my daughter's deceased, so that's more of a kick in the balls. I also defaulted on a federal student loan, so if I ever want to go back to school, there's a consequence to that I can't get another government loan because I defaulted on a federal student loan. So there's not much forgiveness with debt. There's not much forgiveness with your sins, and the fact that I have some great job and life experiences in my past, and yet I won't be able to make it past the first interview with most of these jobs. If I went out and applied for 10, 20 jobs that I'm qualified for, jobs that would pay a decent wage, that I could, have my own apartment, have a car, pay insurance, do the things I need to do. I can't get those jobs because of my criminal past. So yeah, they banned the box. I think one legislative session ago. So they can't ask about felonies on a job application. But there's no law against them asking about that in the job interview. There's no law against them running a background check. So this society and culture we live in is very unforgiving with a lot of things. And there's past sins and your past debt are two chief among those.
Do you honestly feel that maybe your criminal background is what's causing the most frustration versus your mental health?
Yes. Because if I could go out and get a good job, and I used to work for Prevent Child Abuse Minnesota. I used to work for Hamlin Midway Coalition as a community organizer. I've had some great jobs in nonprofit sector. I used to work for a place called the Northwest Area Foundation. They fought poverty in a 5-state region. And I won't be able to work for a lot of nonprofits because of my criminal past. The higher paying management jobs in food and in the food and entertainment industry that I'm qualified for. I have culinary training. I'm food safety certified. I can't get a management job in any restaurant because of my criminal past. You have to pass background checks to be a store manager. So, because you deal with, passion.
So another question I have is also related to your mental health. Do you feel that?
I guess all these things add up, and it really weighs on my mind, and it's a cumulative effect of just it's like a 15-round heavyweight championship fight, and you're losing. You're just getting pounded and pounded on for 15 rounds.
That's a good analogy. So how do you feel about this?
I feel tired and beat up.
You do know other people with alcohol addictions, right? Do you feel that gambling is just as bad or could be as significantly consequential as other addictions like drugs? And
yes, it can, but I'm gonna say with a caveat: you're not gonna die of cirrhosis of the liver from gambling. You're not gonna die from alcohol poisoning from gambling, but mentally, yes. They're on par. They're equal. I don't know. I almost think maybe I would have had more fun if I had a drug addiction throughout life rather than a gambling addiction. At least I would have got something a little more out of it, But, no, I didn't make a statement, but
it's your opinion. I think you're entitled to speak how you feel. I never struggled with the dual diagnosis with an addiction, but I did have like 7 hospitalizations, several stints of depression, several stints of suicidal ideations, a 90-degree IRTs home, and maybe 2 partial hospitalizations. And what I learned from all this is that from a long-winded point from my past to the present to the future, it's a lot to process. So I feel like it's just so much better just take it day by day, and instead of trying to process the whole thing, because you can't just like stick everything in your mouth and assume that
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Exactly. That's another good analogy. So I feel like, do you also feel that maybe in the short term things are doing a lot better than what you might have experienced in the long term, that you feel you're on the right track, that you feel that you are managing things better, or is it still pretty rough? And
it's too early for me to say right now. I like to think I see light at the end of the tunnel, but that would just be hyperbole. I honestly don't see any light yet. I hope to, but my daughter lived in a small town called Grand Rapids, Minnesota, up in Itasca County, and that's a pretty conservative county, pretty conservative town. And her mother Angel would tell me stories that her and maybe 2 or 3 of her friends would would walk through town protesting things like the George Floyd stuff and social injustice. And it makes me smile because it's a very conservative town, and she is protesting with 2 or 3 of her friends. And that's about all the liberals you're gonna have in that town.
Do you kind of feel that when she was growing up, you could see a little bit you in her, or?
Oh yes, yeah.
So my brother wants to ask: Is there any last statement that you want to say to your daughter if she were alive right now?
Nothing more than I love you, and I'm always proud of you. I've been proud of you since the day you were born.